talked about this a lot, mental health, especially
Yes.
through the pandemic. But people in the U.S., they are feeling lonely, and the problem is especially bad in Virginia. A recent report from the U.S.
Really?
Census Bureau found that Virginia is the third loneliest state in the
No, no,
country.
no, 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 no. Now you remember Virginia's slogan.
Yep, Virginia's
Virginia's
for
for
lovers.
lovers.
Yeah, well,
we
apparently
gotta
also have some lonely times out there. Joining us now is Dr. Mirhom again with us here on the DMV Zone. Good to see you, Dr. Mirhom, assistant professor at Columbia University. Okay, let's talk about this because it is, I mean, I understand in the pandemic how people were feeling. We're past that now, and this continues. What are you seeing, and why do you think this is?
Yeah, thanks for having me again. The biggest thing we're seeing is that this is actually a medical issue that we haven't dealt with as much in the pandemic and in the aftermath. People don't realize loneliness can actually be as damaging to our health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. It can impact our risk for cardiovascular disease by 30%. So a big part of this is realizing the Surgeon General is highlighting it, and this survey of saying, hey, Virginia, you're number 3 right behind Alaska and Oregon, is this is actually a serious health issue that we got to pay attention to closely.
Okay, so all right, loneliness pre-COVID levels versus now is really having an impact on people's health, and if so, how much?
Well, so much so, Joe, that when you're looking at your risk of dementia or your risk even of death overall, if you could look at something that can increase your risk of death by 60%, we say, hey, drop everything. I got to focus on this. I'm going to make sure that I'm as intentional as I can be to change this. This is not just a matter of us feeling a little bit more isolated, which we are, or having our connections a little bit less quality, which they are. But the big thing is there are practical, evidence-based ways that we can change this. But the way we do that is first having this conversation. And this study, this Gallup poll actually was a great starting point for that. And I'd love to share a couple of things on how we can combat this, how we can change that.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think that's the next best question, right? How do we change this?
That's the big thing. I know, as you mentioned, Marina, that we talked about this during COVID and we're isolated and we don't have a lot of outlets. Now we've got outlets, but we're sort of getting back in the hang of things. So I want to just give you Dr. Mina's 4 F's for what we can do practically. And that's fitness, food, friends, and faith. Of those 4 areas, the data tells us if we invest deeper in those areas, we see a huge difference. For example, fitness is important in general, movement, but not doing it alone, but with a friend. Who can I partner up in that work with? Food is important because food impacts our mood and impacts the quality of how we feel day to day. Now, how can I share that experience with another person? Food is a big part of our culture, as you mentioned. People are out in Virginia and DC, wonderful places, but doing that with folks. And then friendship, the largest study out of Harvard on happiness, looked at our money, our career, all of these things. The biggest factor that impacted our happiness, which is a way to combat loneliness, is the depth of our relationship, the quality of our connection.
Yeah. Dr. Mina, we got to leave it there with you, but I think you hit on some things, and all in all, it equates to community, to making sure that you find people that support you, because we're not always going to have amazing days, but certainly a broader conversation that I hope you'll come back on the DMV Zone and we can continue to have.
Would love to. Thanks for having me.
DMV Zone. And
Great
speaking of something that probably affect our mood and make us feel lonely is this weather. I promise you.